have just received a headline from the White House saying that the White House would consider a short-term, very short-term increase in the debt limit for a couple of days if, quote, that would help. We turn now to two senators who are on the inside of the discussions here. Senator Rob Portman of Ohio, who interestingly was also director of the Office of Management and Budget. He is a Republican, and Democrat Senator Bill Nelson of Florida. Gentlemen, welcome. Good to have you both here.
Thank you, Tyler.
How do you react to that very quick headline, Senator Portman, that indicates that the White House would be open to a short-term raise in the debt ceiling for a couple of days if that, quote, would be of assistance? Does that help anything?
Well, I hope it's not necessary. I hope that we can find a way to come together, House and Senate, and extend it, but having real, credible, meaningful spending cuts as part of it. So hoping it won't be necessary, Tyler, but I suppose that's showing a little flexibility in terms of the timing. What I do think would be a mistake is if it is a short-term one going a month or 2 months, because I don't think that solves the problem and probably puts us in a position of having a harder time of making the kind of spending cuts that need to be made in order for us to avoid the economic problems that will come. The extension is necessary, but it's not sufficient. We also have to do something on the spending side.
Senator Nelson, I want to change. We've talked a lot about the process here and what's going to happen and what's going to happen next. But what has already happened, it seems to me, in our economy? Today we got a new GDP report indicating that the economy is even slower than we thought. Confidence has really been hurt. This kind of conversation and gridlock doesn't, from where I sit, do anything to help economic confidence.
And that's why I think the short-term couple of days longer is the wrong thing to do. I think the solution is right under our nose. And after you get through all of this harangue that is going back and forth between the House and the Senate, if the House, in fact, can get their plan out of the House, I think if we were on the target for Monday as the deadline to get something done, then I think Sunday night, the solution is right under our nose. You take a portion of Mitch McConnell, a portion of Harry Reid, and a portion of John Boehner, and you put them together. And the part that is already been laid out by Senator Reid is part of it. You could even go the first tranche, as the president would raise the debt ceiling, would be about $2 trillion. That would raise the debt ceiling a like amount. But then you could go to another tranche of another $2 trillion, get a grand bargain of $4 trillion. And the way you could be assured that you could get that if a committee could not pass a package back on an up or down vote in each house, you could then have the Mitch McConnell fail-safe system where there's a resolution of disapproval, which isn't going to pass with a presidential veto.
Senator Portman, why don't you react to what Senator Nelson just said? But let me also ask you a question from the point of view of a former Office of Management and Budget Director. Part of what appears to be being grafted onto the Boehner plan is a balanced budget amendment. Is that good policy for America?
Tyler, ultimately it's what we need. And I say that as a former budget director who went through the process of having to put together a budget over 5 years that was balanced. Very difficult to do so without a requirement of having a balanced budget, as 49 states has, and frankly as all of our families and businesses have all over America, in Florida and Ohio. It's just very difficult, it turns out, for members of Congress to make the tough decisions. So ultimately that's part of the solution. Short term, though, we need to do what Bill Nelson's talking about, and that's reduce the spending in meaningful and credible ways as part of the extension. Otherwise, we're not going to solve the underlying problem, and we'll have some of the same consequences to our economy that were talked about a moment ago. We have a weak economy. We have a lot of nervousness out there. The market is watching carefully to see what happens here. We don't want to see a downgrade of our treasuries. This will require us to deal with this historic deficit and debt. The balanced budget is ultimately the answer. I'm a strong supporter of it. It needs to be done. But it takes a while because you have to pass it here with the 2/3 vote, and then of course it has to go to 3/4 of the states to be ratified. Most think it would take 3 to 4 to 5 years to do that.
I want to turn back to and frame the question I asked Senator Nelson in a slightly different way for you. The Boehner plan has a kind of debt limit increase now, revisit in 6 months or thereabouts. But we hear businesses, and I'm sure you hear from businesses in your state, that the thing we can't have is uncertainty. Wouldn't that approach merely institutionalize the uncertainty that businesses in the market so abhor?
I think it would have the opposite impact, and let me tell you why I say that. I think it would ensure that we have some real sustainable reductions in the entitlement programs. As important as they are not sustainable in their current form. And I think because the discretionary spending cuts that Bill Nelson talked about would be at the top end for the first part of this. The second part would almost necessarily deal with the so-called entitlement programs. And that's what the markets are looking for, Tyler. You know that as you talk to people. No one has looked at this debt situation, including the President's own fiscal commission, and come away with any other conclusion. Right. You have to deal with this long-term spending problem we have, which is the unsustainability of these programs. So that needs to be addressed in some way, and this approach seems to be the best way to do it.
I want to come back to you, Senator Nelson, and ask, as I've observed this week, and you can sit up in New York and you can look at what's going on here and you can say, this is dysfunctional, it is a circus. But on some level, I am struck this week by the idea that this is precisely the kind of conversation about who we are, what we want our government to do, what we can afford, and how big we want our government to be. That is the heart of democracy and the heart of what we ought to be talking about now.
I agree. It's just too bad that the stakes are so high that we could conceivably go into default. Now, if Rob and I could cut this deal, we could get it worked out in 30 minutes. And
we're bringing in some pizza later. We'll let you do that if you want to.
He, of course, is such a gentleman that he could easily work and get this thing done. But you see what's going back and forth. It's this political football. It's this excessive partisanship. It's this excessive ideological rigidity. For example, the balanced budget amendment, I'm for it. But look what they've done in the House. They've put on a strange kind of balanced budget amendment and says that we still go into default unless both houses pass a balanced budget amendment by Tuesday. Well, that's an impossibility. So it's just, again, a part of this game that is a bunch of nonsense.
All right, gentlemen, we have to leave it there, alas. I know you guys are going to be working all weekend, and I suspect we'll be seeing you. One final thought?
Quick correction.
Please.
I think the House bill, as I understand it, has the balanced budget as the second part. In other words, it would have to be passed between now and whenever the first debt limit ends, which I think is something like the end of January. That's the latest version.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate your coming by, and good luck this weekend.
Thanks, Tyler.
Because our nation turns its lonely eyes to you, as Paul Simon